Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathaniel. I particularly love movies, and I want to share that with you. From the horrifying to the terrifying, the spine-chilling to the hair-raising, along with the straight-up disgusting. WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around, and we'll leave you with a movie that will make your blood run cold. 88.1 The Burg, your music central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, everybody. My name is Nathaniel, the host of the show. And on tonight's show of What to Watch Wednesdays, the dead shall rise. That's right. Tonight we are going to be talking about the Living Dead trilogy, all three movies directed by George A. Romero, the zombie classics that started an entire movement of cinema as a whole, horror cinema, cinema in general, just any kind of movie at all that's based off of zombies owes their DNA to George A. Romero. And we're going to be talking about the movie that started it all and the two sequels directed by him. And yes, that means that we are talking specifically about the original Night of the Living Dead from 1968, followed by Dawn of the Dead from 1978, and Day of the Dead from 1985 to close out the night. We all know what zombies are. We're all very familiar with zombies. We all hate and we're all very tired of zombies. And when I say we're all that way, I mean I'm not. I'm in the complete minority by saying that I absolutely love zombie movies so very much. And you will find out exactly why that is when after the break we jump into Night of the Living Dead, so stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your music central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Night of the Living Dead from 1968, available to watch now on Max. Basic plotline of Night of the Living Dead is it's about a group of people who all convene or meet up in an abandoned farmhouse in the rural countryside. All of them doing this exact thing for the same general reason. Corpses have come back to life and have started attacking them. More specifically, it's basically the dead coming back to life. The living dead, if you will. See, that's where they get the idea for the title. And before you ask, yes, the corpses are referred to as the living dead. And no, they're not zombies. What? What could I possibly be talking about? Well, see, Night of the Living Dead it's known for kind of revolutionizing the zombie genre, more so inventing the zombie genre in popular culture, specifically to film. But they aren't necessarily referred to as zombies in the movie itself. Fun fact, they're just called ghouls. It's really more of a fun fact if you've never seen the movie before, because it's pretty obvious that they're not going out of their way to just say, look, there's zombies walking around. They're more like, they're called ghouls, or they're like just referred to as those things that walk around, and they're like assumed to be dead bodies because they're like found in a graveyard. And it's like, oh, what are these things? What's going on? This is so confusing. It's just like, for being the movie that revolutionized, I can't say the word revolutionized, apparently. For being the movie that revolutionized the zombie genre, it's just very surprising that they aren't called zombies. And it's also very surprising that the movie that did it is India's All Get Out. For 1968, at least, you'd think like the big Hollywood companies would be the ones that would kind of invent the entire genre and kind of create the trend. But no, it was very much an independent production. This was made on a very low budget that, adjusted for inflation, is only about $1 million. So in that kind of Blair Witch Project area of low budget. And it was all with like a very small cast. We've got our main core group of survivors. That's about like 7 to 8 people, and then there's like maybe 40 if I'm being extremely generous, probably closer to 30 people who play the zombies, and then you've got assorted people who are like local One good example would be like a local news anchor, and then you've got like local police and stuff like that. In total, I'd say that the total cast is less than about 100 people, right? And the main action of the movie is all taking place in this rural farmhouse. So they don't really have like a big change in location all the time. It's really like a vast majority of it. About 95% of it takes place directly in this farmhouse that none of the characters actually live in. And fun fact, they didn't have the specific rights to it. It was a condemned building that they just went and filmed in and destroyed because it was condemned. Nobody was going to care. Again, very much an independent thing. For those of you who listened last week, you know that I really like the Evil Dead series, and one of the most effective things in the original Evil Dead was that it was set in one specific location, that being a cabin in the middle of the woods. And so, naturally, that means that with Night of the Living Dead, I greatly appreciate them setting it in just a rural country farmhouse. I think it's one of the most effective things about the movie. Because despite its limitations, the movie is eerie and paced perfectly. I cannot get over how well they managed to convey this overall feel of need for survival and conflicting ideas of how to do that among the characters. It's such an amazing achievement that you're able to do that in such a small space with such a limited amount of resources, and yet the movie does it pretty much perfectly. I have very few complaints about any characters. Of course, there are some characters that are a little bit more annoying than others that have certain ideas of how they do it. Mr. Cooper specifically is just very annoying in his kind of insistence on hiding in the cellar of the farmhouse instead of trying to help out with boarding up the windows around them. But at the same time, you understand his motivation, you understand why he is the way he is, and I can say that for exactly every other character. Every single one has a reason for doing the thing that they're doing. Again, it seems like such a simple thing to do, but it's not always that easy. It's definitely an achievement for like a location that's isolated and for something that feels so contained. It's very easy for it to kind of plod along and not feel like it's going anywhere. And yet they manage to kind of keep up this consistent level of threat from the zombies, or more so referred to as the ghouls, during the course of the movie, that it never seems to stagnate even a little bit. It never loses the momentum that it's built up, and for that, I give it massive amounts of applause. And I'm really trying to restrain myself here, because I have so many more things I could say about the original Night of the Living Dead. This is like the Cliff Notes version of all of my opinions about this movie. So many things I haven't even brushed the surface of yet, let alone scratched. But I will say this to close out my thoughts. If you do not like zombie movies, you should watch Night of the Living Dead from 1968. Don't watch the remake. Don't watch any other version that's been changed around. Don't watch the colored version or watch anything that was like a specific like foreign dub. Watch the original. It's in the public domain. You can easily find it literally on the Wikipedia article for the thing. You can download it there. Just watch it there. And if you still don't like the movie, if you don't like the movie as itself, you don't like that it has zombies in it, you don't like that it invented the zombie genre, that's fine. But I will not listen to your opinion on zombies until you've seen Night of the Living Dead. If somebody tells me I don't like zombie movies, and then they go, I've never seen the original Night of the Living Dead, I immediately discount their opinion. I'm not even joking. That's my recommendation for you. So there's that. And speaking of opinions on zombie movies, the next one is also a zombie movie. Stick around after the break, where we'll jump into the sequel to Night of the Living Dead. Not exactly as essential, but still very good. That being Dawn of the Dead. Stick around for that.
88.1 The Burg, your music central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays.
And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Dawn of the Dead from 1978, available to rent now from Amazon Prime. Continuing on from the first movie in terms of the plotline, the dead returning to life has now become a worldwide issue, more so a worldwide phenomenon, but that feels like I'm describing a band instead of like a apocalyptic scenario where all the dead bodies are now walking around as zombies. So it's more a worldwide issue. Essentially, we follow a group of about four people, as if there's like half a person who's just walking by. Hey, it's possible it's a zombie movie, but no, it's four people exactly. That being two news station employees who are dating each other, a boy and a man and a woman, and two ex-SWAT team members who are kind of just more so lumped in together because they both want to quit the SWAT team. And those four meet up, get in a helicopter, and escape the city and go whole away in an abandoned mall. More so abandoned that there's no humans left in there. There are definitely zombies left in the mall, but they kind of just hide away at this mall for the rest of the movie. And that's where a lot of the main core action happens. So, Dawn of the Dead, as you probably could tell, it happened a long time after the original Night of the Living Dead. The original Night of the Living Dead came out in 1978, not 1978, 1968, and Dawn of the Dead was in 1978. There we go. I nearly got it backwards there for just a quick second. But either way, 10 years span, right? And don't worry, the original director of Night of the Living Dead is in fact directing Dawn of the Dead. And let's just say, right off the bat, that I didn't mention it with the original movie, but the zombies eat flesh. Sounds kind of obvious, right? Well, in Dawn of the Dead, you see it happen quite often, as in, like, someone will get tackled by a bunch of zombies and you just see them, like, bite into a person's shoulder. And there's a lot of violence in that area. And then there's a lot of violence in every other area. Because it's like 10 years later, a lot of things had changed in terms of how movies could, well, in terms of what you could do with effects, and also the cultural values of, like, it being 1978. You could get away with a lot more violent stuff than what the original movie pulled off. And they had more budget, and it had been a long time since the first movie, so, like, he had a reputation. So, like, there's a lot more violence. There's a lot more zombies just eating people. There's a lot more zombies in general. During the first 5 minutes of Dawn of the Dead, you see more people on screen than the entire cast of the original Night of the Living Dead. And there's just a lot more. If I had to describe Dawn of the Dead, it's a lot more. It's a lot more chaotic. There's a lot more investment from the main cast. But there's also just a lot more zombies and a lot more violence and a lot more swearing and just a lot more. But as I've alluded to, with there being a lot more investment in the main characters, there is a lot more of the good stuff as much as there is a lot more of the stuff. When I say stuff, I'm referring to violence. Because depending on how you look at it, it can either be good or bad. If there's a lot more violence against robots, that's good. If there's a lot more violence against small puppies, that's a bad thing. You see what I'm trying to say there. So, I should say more does not necessarily mean it's a better movie. More just means there's a lot more of it to kind of digest and work through. The original one, again, being so contained, it's a lot like the original Evil Dead in that there's just... It's more digestible and kind of more confined to a space that allows you to kind of get acquainted with it quite quickly because they don't really leave it all that often. And with this movie, it's a pretty big location, quite the jump, especially since it's so many years later. But with that, there being that much of a jump, there's bound to be some casualties here and there. First off would probably be the pacing. The pacing's not as good. It's not as tightened. There's not as much of a heightened survival instinct as the original movie. At the same time, it's not like without stakes, which will be a problem with the next movie we talk about. But before getting ahead of myself, it's got at least a little bit more focus since there is, weirdly enough, less characters in the core survivor group. There's a lot more of everything else, but the main core survival group has been shortened down to, again, 4 people. And with that, you get more time for them to get acquainted with each other, and you get more time spent with them kind of adjusting to their location rather than just using it as a bounce board to kind of survive. As in with the first movie, they're just all contained in the simple one house. And because of that, they kind of have to just like rush around to like board up all the windows and doors and then hide in the cellar and all that. They're kind of constantly on the move. With this movie, they are on the move quite a lot, but they also take time to kind of sit down and settle into this mall location. So it's kind of an interesting balance of what do we have more of, what do we have less of. There's a lot more of the more stuff again, but there's some things where they kind of stripped it back and made it work in some ways that are better than the original. But I will say overall, it's not better than the original. It's just more of what made the original very good with a lot more violence again. A little bit disorganized with this review here, but it's also kind of a good way to kind of illustrate what they added more of to this movie, or what they actually added as in a completely new thing that wasn't a factor in the original movie. Because it's made in the 70s, they definitely have a different approach to the style and the feel of it. The original movie had a lot more of an eerie feeling. It had a more contained kind of interesting sort of black and white feel, and an interesting like, what's going on? How do we kind of deal with our situation? With Dawn of the Dead, it has more of a surreal acceptance of knowing the situation that's going on. It's more of a we're kind of from the perspective of knowing what these things are. We know they're people, and we know that they're dead bodies, essentially. We're not being informed with it as it goes on. We've been at the crux of it, again, because some of them are news anchors, so they know the basics of it. So they have the surreal acceptance and understanding of what's going on, and a surreal sort of feeling of, this is not right, but we have to survive somehow. Very different from the original one. Not exactly better, but still better than the next movie we will be talking about, which is Day of the Dead. Stick around after the break, where we'll jump into that one.
88.1 The Burg, your music central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays.
And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Day of the Dead from 1985, available to watch now on Tubi. Following on from Dawn of the Dead, we now follow a group of scientists and soldiers who are trapped in a military bunker. More so trapped in that there's a bunch of zombies outside and they don't leave very often. So essentially, these scientists and soldiers must make the best of their situation and try and coexist with each other as the zombies outside grow larger in number and the threat becomes more prevalent in their lives. So this one's not as good as Dawn of the Dead, and it's definitely not as good as Night of the Living Dead. But I mean, that doesn't mean it's awful. Just means that it's not as good, right? And it's definitely, it's from the 80s, so I have some bias towards the 80s that might benefit it. At the same time, I can say with confidence that this is a good example of my bias towards the 80s and 80s movies, more specifically, not being able to influence or sway my opinion all that much about Day of the Dead. I'll say it outright first of all. In comparison to even Dawn of the Dead, where things felt like they were slowing down just a little bit because we were getting a bigger location and had to spread out a little bit more, this one has a lot less stakes to it. There's a lot less of a prevalent threat because they're more locked into a bunker that's kind of more reinforced and feels a lot more secure. And for that reason, it just kind of automatically defeats the purpose of zombies being the primary threat, because the only way they're going to get in is if somebody lets them in. That's not an accidental spoiler, don't worry. But
by their nature, I think zombies are probably one of the best threats you can possibly have in any movie ever, because they travel in massive groups, right? And one of them is enough to deal with on your own, but when they're in those massive groups, you suddenly have this issue where you can't handle them on your own. So you have to team up with other people to work on it. In this movie, and more importantly, it seems like there's always a constant supply of zombies in any zombie movie. If you've seen any of them, you can probably guess that like they just kind of keep popping up and popping up, especially if they're like invincible ones. But even if they're not, there's a lot of zombies in any particular zombie movie, which is what Dawn of the Dead did really well. And this one tries to do and almost gets there, but falls short in the fact that we spend a lot more time underground in the bunker with the people, more specifically, the interaction between the poor civilian scientists and the really, really brutish and stupid soldiers, military people, right? And there's a limited number of them, okay? So first off, how original. People are the real monsters in comparison to the zombies. Again, how original, guys. Round of applause. But also, more importantly, there's a limited number. I feel less kind of driven to care about your narrative progression when you have a literal unlimited threat right outside your door that could be like knocking at the specific entrance to your military base at any point, and instead they're just all locked behind a gate for most of the movie, right? Do you see the dissonance that I'm getting here? I'd rather have the near infinite threat than the measly human threat, right? And even and it's very intentionally set up to make the military people be the main threat, because they're like the technically main antagonist is just the commander of the military people, who's just like, if you defy me, I will shoot you. And it's like, I get what you're trying to say, Romero. George A. Romero clearly doesn't like the military with the way he made them so incredibly stupid in Day of the Dead. He clearly is very anti-establishment, very anti-military, against the U.S. Army in all of its forms, because of how stupid he makes the soldiers and how one-dimensional they feel as the primary villains of the movie. I get it. We're in a zombie movie. Focus up here and stop messing around. We know that humans are the real monsters. We get it. Where are the zombies? And this is coming from me. I know I sound kind of crazy, because most people would be like, why do you want to see zombies? It's the principle of the thing. If you're going to give me a zombie movie, show me more zombies, okay? That's the principle of the thing. And more importantly than that, I will say, as biased as I am towards zombies, I'm also biased towards a good story and a good narrative. And in order to have a good story and a good narrative, you tend to need to have a protagonist. And I could say with confidence that Day of the Dead doesn't necessarily have a core identified main character, even among the civilian scientists. Of course, there's like 4 characters who kind of mesh together into creating the main one, but they're also disconnected from each other. In Dawn of the Dead, with there being 4 characters, they were well acquainted with each other, they were well related, they worked together to get to the same goal most of the time, and when there was conflicts, it made sense why it was happening. It's something that carried on from the first movie. With this movie, the one that I think is kind of supposed to be the main character is Dr. Sarah. She's the scientist who has these like hallucinations that she's like it's basically like the dream thing where you have a dream where you're like falling off of a scooter, but then you wake up the moment before you hit the ground. It's that, but with like imagining zombies coming out of the walls, or her like being attacked or being left behind in a helicopter or something like that. Just imagine that being her main character trait, and also being like completely out of her depth in comparison to the military people with literal weapons pointed at her. Okay? That's the main character. Forgive me for saying it. but it's not a very compelling character to watch if she can't fight back. And not in the like, oh, I can handle myself kind of way. More so the, you literally can't do anything, or and if you try to do anything, they will shoot you in the head. Okay? That's not necessarily a very easy thing to get attached to. I'm just going to say it. And any of the other ones, they're kind of separated from her from the very beginning, and then they come together at the end of it. I didn't really want that. I wanted them to be more on each other's side throughout most of it, and then slowly lose each other's side throughout the movie, which is what Dawn of the Dead did, right? It's just kind of a shame, because the more I talk about it, the more negative I sound. When in reality, I want to say that it's just not as good in comparison to the first two that came before it. Day of the Dead, to me, it feels like they had an idea and they knew what they were trying to do with it, but they missed out on doing the thing that the first two movies did right and gave more of between the jump between Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. With Dawn of the Dead, you've got basically a more contained environment still with zombies everywhere, sure. But none of them are supposed to be there. They weren't mall workers who were there originally. And in the original movie, none of the characters lived in the house that they ended up in. With Day of the Dead, weirdly enough, a lot of the tension is removed when we're in a military bunker and half of the cast is military people. Do you see why I don't necessarily think this one works the best? That's all I could really say right now for Day of the Dead. I have so much more to say about it. I have so much more to say about all of them and other movies like it. Maybe others in the series, maybe others that are just more slightly related to it. We'll see, and by we'll see, I mean we shall see on this week's episode of What to Watch Weekends, happening this Saturday from 8 to 10 p.m. Please do tune in to that show. It'll be here on 88.1 The Burg once again. Please follow What to Watch Wednesdays on Instagram at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces. And thank you all for tuning in and listening to my rants about zombie movies here on What to Watch Wednesdays. I will be back on What to Watch Wednesdays next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. once again here on 88.1 The Burg. So with that, thank you all for listening in once again, and I'll see you all next time where I will tell you all what to watch. See ya.